right, you can accept that. And let's just go ahead and pull up chapter 6. Okay. And there really are two broad topics in chapter 6. One is process management, and that's not an area where the examiners are going to spend a lot of time. So I'm going to put 5 points there. The other area really is IT. Okay, even though they lay them out in different modules and whatnot, IT discussion is probably 10 points. It is heavy. Okay, and I just want to say a couple words before we start to look at this stuff. I think this isn't one of those areas that students, it's the last chapter and it's the last topic that we talk about officially in the chapters before we get to final review. And I think what happens is sometimes students think, oh, okay, well, probably, the IT stuff is not going to be that involved, so I'm not going to worry so much about it. Meanwhile, it is heavy. So do not underestimate the coverage and the importance of IT issues on the exam, particularly, and that we'll get into IT security. And of course, as we're all aware, IT security is an area of growing concern. I think I heard something from the President Biden was saying today that there's a potential that, there's going to be some hacking coming up, and, from the Russian situation, and telling companies to be aware and giving them a lot of guidance on that. And so that is part of this overall IT discussion. So it is something to be aware of. Now, a warning about today's material, guys. It is highly definitional. It is very, it's dry. I'm going to just, for lack of a better description or better term to describe it, it is fairly dry. So you're going to see lots of highlighting, lots of flashcard suggestions. I think your best bet in studying this material is to get the flashcards out and compare what I'm asking a flashcard with versus what they have with the flashcards. Quickly add flashcards that I have suggested that maybe they did not provide you in your pre-made Becker cards. Quickly memorize those cards and get to the homework with particular attention on the multiple choice questions for this IT step. Get that done as quickly as possible while everything is still fresh. If you have to add a few flashcards, that's fine. And then you can start to turn your attention to the final review as you get into the final prep for your exam. Okay, all right. So with all that, let's go ahead and talk about process management. Okay, and basically, when we talk about process management here in our first chapter, you can see that business process management, okay, really talks about the idea of continuous improvement in customer satisfaction, okay? And so we can see that by focusing on processes, an organization becomes more nimble and responsible than hierarchical organizations that are managed by functions. So we're going to manage ourselves in a manner that will allow us to exercise continuous improvement, and is believed that that is a more efficient way to than and more nimble than a hierarchical organization approach. Now, the activities that are involved in this sort of continuous improvement are design. The design phase involves identification of the existing processes. The modeling introduces variable into the conceptual design for what if analysis. And then we have execution. Our design changes are implemented. We monitor and see that we are actually achieving the expected performance. And then we optimize, we use the monitoring data to essentially tweak, and thus we get into this notion of continuous improvement. So flashcard, the phases, high level, I don't know that you need necessarily every single word that's there, but you should definitely, have the high level design, modeling, execution, monitoring, optimization. And then if you need a few words to help you remember what those different terms mean, then you can add those to your flashcard. And of course, if Becker has already provided you flashcard for that, you don't need to make that. Okay. Now, some of the techniques that we'll use in this sort of continuous improvement, and what we will do is we will define what the original process is as a baseline. We will then measure indicators that will show a change to the processes, reduce time, increase customer contacts, for example. Analyze various simulations or models that are used to determine the target or optimal improvement. Then, of course, we want to improve, and then we may want to control by coming up with dashboards or other measures to show that we communicate that we are achieving the desired improvements. Okay, now we're going to talk more about measuring on the next page, because obviously we want to understand how we are actually achieving these improvements. So you'll see that next page here in a couple seconds. We'll talk about some measuring techniques. Okay, go ahead and flashcard those techniques and then come over, and there is a method that has been called plan, do, check. Okay, and so plan is the design phase that we've been talking about. Doing is when you actually implement the plan. Checking is the monitoring, and then you act to continuously improve, commit to the process. So all of this is a continuous improvement notion here. Flashcard the elements of plan, do, check, which in act, which is actually what it is: plan, do, check, act. Okay, now again, I said that we would talk about various measures to see how we're achieving the objectives, and I don't know that you need to flashcard these. Okay, let's flashcard them. Okay, if you don't have one already, let's go ahead and flashcard them. But gross revenue could be a measure, customer contacts, customer satisfaction, operational statistics such as the delivery times, etc. Okay. Okay, good. Now, some of the benefits of the continuous improvement approach: we can become more efficient, more effective, and we can be more, we've already talked about being more nimble. I have greater agility in achieving the various company objectives. And so you can go ahead and flashcard that. Okay, good. So that's the notion of continuous improvement. Let's start to take a look at this notion of shared services, and then we're going to talk about outsourcing some things that we'll be doing, and then we'll talk about offshoring, which is essentially moving our operations outside of the US. So you come over and you take a look at our shared services. And shared services refers to seeking out redundant services and combining them, and then sharing those services with a group or an organization. Okay, so let's just look at this example here, which is a little bit helpful. You can see here that they talk about shared service plan, whereby all human resources, payroll, and legal department services will be consolidated through one central function. So that would be a notion of the kinds of things that would be shared services. Consolidation of redundant services creates efficiency, but might have the following, and this is starting to sound a lot like what advantage, disadvantage type discussion. So let's just go ahead and flashcard some of the disadvantages. There could be service flow disruption if we have a consolidation to a single location. And we're trying to transition, we could end up with rework, duplication, as well as increases in the time it'll take to deliver a service. And then failure demand, and the demand for shared service caused by failure to do something or do something right for a customer is called failure. And you can go ahead and include on your flashcard here: failure demand results when a task must be performed for a second time because it was incorrectly performed the first time. So now there's a failure demand, right? You're creating a demand for a service because we're not getting it right the first time. this is being caused by the fact that we're trying to make changes, and any kind of change could bring on a failure demand. If you're trying to share services, that could be the case. And right now, I feel like there's a lot of failure demand out there, because I feel like almost everything I deal with these days, and I don't mean at GGU, I mean when I'm dealing with just services that I'm taking as a customer, I always have to call back again and say, what's going on? How come? What's the problem? Why didn't you guys do this? But that's sort of now I know a name for that. That's failure demand. Okay, good. Come over. Let's talk about outsourcing. Outsourcing is taking a function that we were performing internally and now finding an outside company that will provide that. For example, many companies these days outsource their payroll to organizations like now I'm going to draw a blank on their name. They do almost everybody's payroll, and I want to say PDF, and I know that's not ADP. Thank you, John. I forgot it there for a minute. Everybody now is having their payroll done by ADP these days. Okay, so that's an example of outsourcing. When I say everybody, most companies do. Okay, so outsourcing can provide for efficiencies, but there are also some risks. So let's go ahead and flashcard that. We always like to talk about risks, benefits. What do we keep calling that? The risk versus the benefits, but there's another way they've been articulating that. And I always have you flashcard that. So let's just take a look. Quality risk. If we're outsourced, suppliers must provide may provide substandard products or services, and then the quality of the service, poorly designed service agreements may impede the quality of service. And so you can flashcard that. So those agreements need to be carefully written to avoid those things. Coming over and continuing that flashcard onto the next page. Okay, productivity may be reduced even though the service provider's employees are paid less. Staff turnover, we could lose valued experienced staff if we start outsourcing, and the people that used to do that are going to leave the organization. This is sort of it's an outsourcing, but it could also be it kind of smacks more of outsourcing concerns, which if you're outsourcing to another country, there could be language barriers. Security of information that you're going to have to provide to third parties. And so you have to be concerned that maybe you may have good IT security, but if you're giving social security numbers and whatnot out to a company that does not have good security, then that could be a problem. Qualifications of the outsourced individuals, do they have the expertise? And then labor and security, again, as we outsource more of our operations, then the people inside start feeling like, geez, I guess I better look for another job because I'm next or something. Okay, so go ahead and flashcard all of those concerns about outsourcing. Now, offshoring is like outsourcing, but now, as we mentioned, if we're dealing with outsourcing, offshoring, I should say, then we're going to actually move a function outside of the United States. And so the kinds of things, the most common things, information technology, business processes such as, accounting and tax compliance, that gets a little scary. Even the CPA firms are doing some of this now. They're actually having some of the work that is done, particularly in the area of tax, is done overseas, or even their human resources. I'm understanding from some of my former students, if you have a human resource question, you don't talk to somebody in the US, somebody outside the US about these issues. And so that's even happening, right in the middle of the CPA industry. Research and development and a knowledge process such as reading x-rays, those sort of things can actually be offshore. So you can go ahead and flashcard those types of things that could be offshored. And then the business risk of offshoring are generally the same as outsourcing, but with greater emphasis on the lack of controls associated with proximity. And again, they mentioned the language issue here again, which to me, why is that? Why did they mention language up there? I'm thinking that language probably better belongs down here, in my opinion, but you can include it in both places, I guess. Okay, all right, good. Now come over and selecting improvement initiatives, okay? And there is a rational approach and an irrational approach. And, you know, I don't think saying it's irrational to me is a little harsh, you know. I think what they're saying here is knee-jerk approach, right? You see something happening and you just want to try to improve because you heard about some newfangled thing and you just knee jerk and you jump in. So that's really where they're talking about irrational. They lack structure, systematic evaluation based on fashion, fad, or trend. Okay, so they're calling that irrational. I mean, to me, irrational is when you know, sit there and say, oh, you know, if I drive down that street, when I drive home this way, good things happen. If I drive home that way, bad things happen. You know, that's irrational. Superstition is irrational. I don't think that, you know, responding to a fashion or a fad is irrational. It might be a little knee jerk, right? So what we want to do is we want to have a more rational, maybe a better word is systematic approach. Okay, there is that word, systematic. Okay, and you can see that we would do a strategic gap analysis, review our competitive priorities, review production objectives, and then choose an improvement program. So it's more what? It is more systematic. And once you go ahead and flashcard what we're calling the more rational, systematic approach versus irrational is more knee-jerk, right? Okay, so you come over and you take a look at implementing improvement initiatives, and we absolutely need, there's several crucial features, and so we have to have internal leadership, okay? And so you've got to get the buy-in of senior management on these things. People don't like change, okay? And so if you're going to try and improve some process, there needs to be that internal leadership. So it needs to come from senior management levels in the organization, okay? There needs to be inspections that the implementation is to be monitored and measured. There's got to be executive management support. So not only senior management, but executive management. In other words, we're talking about right here, executive management is what I wanted to underline there. Okay, executive involvement and you know, visibly support the initiative. Tone at the top, right, is really what we're talking about here. And then internal process ownership. Individuals most deeply involved with the process management must be committed to the need of process improvement and have the resources to carry it out. So you want to do these things, obviously you need what? You need leadership, you need you know, support at the highest levels of the organization, and then you need to provide the resources to actually implement these changes. Okay, let's come down and let's just take a look at the next page, okay? And let's just look at some management philosophy and techniques for process improvement. And so you can look and you can see right here is what I'm going to highlight, just in time. Okay, so just in time schedules the development of resources just in time to meet customer or production requirements. The underlying concept just in time is that inventory does not add value. And so we want to have a product or a service just in time, okay, to meet our customers' needs. Now you come over and benefits. to just in time, a synchronization of product scheduling with demand, arrival of supplies at regular intervals, improved coordination with our suppliers, more efficient flow of goods between warehouses and production, reduced setup time, and greater efficiency in the use of employees with multiple skills. You know, what they don't talk about here with just in time, because they, you know, kind of go on about the benefits, but some of the disadvantages was the word I was trying to think of earlier. So these are some of the advantages, some of the disadvantages, some of the risks, whatever. And to me, the big one is what? We're going to upset our customers. We're not going to have things in stock at the time that they want them. And I don't know, guys, I feel like these days, they're trying to condition us to just accept that as consumers. It's almost now the expectation. You go in to buy something and they say, well, we're out of stock of it. Or, you know, come over here and we'll order it for you. You'll get it in the obligatory 6 to 8 weeks. So I feel like there's been a conditioning of the consumer to just expect delays now in almost anything you walk into the store and decide that you want. I feel like I see stores full of product, but it seems like anything that I ask for, they don't have it. You got to wait for it to be ordered. So I think that there's a lot of that going on. And then the other side is these days, folks just go online and order things, and they, you know, are already conditioned to wait a certain amount of time, you know, before that is actually delivered. So these are some of the benefits, but the disadvantage would be what? Upset customers if we have stock out. So why don't we go ahead and put that down, even though the book didn't mention it as a risk. I'm going to put it as a risk, which is what the risk here is. It will incur stock outs, we're out of stock, and decreased customer satisfaction. I don't know, maybe that bothers me more than you, but I just get irked if I go somewhere and I look at, you know, I want to get something like a new pen because my pen doesn't write that well. And I went over to Best Buy, finally got over there. Hey guys, I need a new pen. Oh, we're out of stock. Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that, you know, starts to kind of upset customers, right? Okay, all right, good. Now you come over and you take a look at total quality management. Now, total quality management was all the rage in the 90s. It's not as talked about these days because it's kind of got folded into this whole idea of continuous improvement. Okay, so that's really what total quality management does, but we've already talked about continuous improvement, and it used to be called total quality management. Okay, but it basically has TQM has a recognition that each function of the corporation exists to satisfy the customer. Okay, but again, we've kind of been talking about this as continuous improvement, and I don't see it called total quality management as much anymore. Okay, so you can just go ahead and just flashcard what the definition of TQM is, and then they start to talk about some of the factors here at a high level. It's continuous improvement, it's workforce improvement, it's needs top management support. You have to have that top management sponsorship. There has to be objective measures and timely acknowledgement of TQM achievements, which to me is like a built-in, acknowledgement that these things will work, because if they say, yeah, you have to have timely acknowledgement of TQM achievements, it almost starts to become like this, cult sort of behavior. Oh, look what TQM accomplished today. So I don't know. I think it's no really different than what we've been talking about, these continuous improvements and then having measures, and then TQM is sort of adding in this sort of cheerleading component to it. And believe it or not, when I worked for the Government Accountability Office for GAO for years there, for about 5 years, it was all about TQM and how we were going to use TQM, and they were constantly coming up with all these different awards that you could give people, and it just kind of started to get this artificial feeling, of celebration of, changing the paper and the copier. It's just starting to become a little bit ridiculous at some point. So, but there's a belief that there should be this sort of cheerleading component, this acknowledgement of TQM achievements, and then ongoing training. But when I look at this stuff, guys, I don't see anything particularly different from what we've already talked about with some of these management philosophies and the continuous improvement. Okay. Now you come over and you could do quality audits and gap analysis. Okay. Now this is, just to make clear, because I know this stuff starts to wash over me a little bit here. This is now getting beyond total quality management now. And now they're talking about TQM. And now they're talking about quality audits. And it's a technique used as part of the strategic positioning function in which management assesses the quality practices of the organization. So when you take a look, you could also do gap analysis and determines the gap or difference between the industry's best practices and the current practices of the organization. Lean manufacturing, okay, or lean production requires the use of only those resources required to meet the requirements of the customers. Waste reduction, the focus of lean is on waste reduction and efficiency. Continuous improvement, which we've already talked about, but now we're going to put a name on that, which is the Kaizen process. That refers to continuous improvement. Why don't you go ahead and flashcard that Kaizen is also another term for continuous improvement. Okay, and Kaizen occurs at the manufacturing stage. Ongoing cost for cost reductions. Okay, now activity-based costing, we talked about the process, the mechanics of activity-based costing in an earlier chapter here. This is something that is, very popular right now, activity-based costing, where we go ahead and we map out processes and we try to see which kind of resources are used by these processes. And then we look for efficiencies in these various processes. So we try to find processes that are using up resources, and then we look to achieve improvements in those specific processes. Okay, so there has to be a careful identification of cost. Okay, and they basically highlight the cost of activities, and then we can then turn around and try to implement changes to reduce those processes. But of course, we have to have the reduce those costs, but we have to have the information available to do that. I was involved in giving some comments on a study about activity-based costing that was being done at Stanford. And why don't you go ahead and flashcard that activity-based costing really focuses on, reducing cost. But they asked me to look at an ABC study there, and what they were looking at is how they were able to reduce cost in, now I'm going to draw a blank as to what country it was. It was Nepal. They were somewhere in the Middle East. They were looking at providing cataract surgery in ways that they had reduced some of the cost of that. And so they were looking at various costs and various activities. The only problem that I had with it is it seemed to me that they were buying into some processes that were antiquated because they were lower cost. For example, in cataract surgery, they were talking about that they had figured out how to use the needles that they put the anesthetic in. So I guess they literally stick a needle somewhere in the eye area to give anesthetic, and they figured out some way to more effectively clean the needles that they use. Meanwhile, in the United States, we use drops as for the anesthetic. So I'm like, you're getting locked in to trying to, look at all these activities and how to reduce the cost of them. Meanwhile, you're sticking a needle in someone's eye as opposed to giving them drops. So it can't just be about, cost all the time, right? So you always have to consider other, advancements in technology and whatnot. Another example is, Kaiser, because I'm diabetic and I wasn't watching my blood sugar because I don't like sticking my finger. And so I asked Kaiser if I could get one of those ones that are put out by Dexcom or something like that, where you just put it on your arm, you put your cell phone on your arm, put a thing on your arm, you put your cell phone on your arm, and then it measures your blood sugar that way, and you don't have to prick your finger. And she said, well, we don't cover that here because it's more costly. And I'm like, well, riding a horse probably would be cheaper than driving a car, but I decided to drive a car today because there's more advanced technology that I could utilize here. So my decision was, I'm not going to measure my blood, I'm just going to lose some weight. So that helped rather than sit there and try to prick my finger all the time, because I didn't want to do that. So anyway, those kinds of decisions about cost could lead to decrease in, our product or our service and whatnot. So you got to be careful. You always got to keep that in mind. Okay, good. Then we come over and we talk about demand flow. And demand flow is basically using customer demand as the basis for resource allocation. Demand flow contrasts with resource allocation based on sales forecast or master scheduling. So again, that's kind of bringing more back in, I think, what I was saying a little bit there, that you have to consider, hey, what's the demand part? It's just not all about trying to, reduce cost all the time. Sometimes you've got to incur some more cost if technology moves forward and whatnot. Okay, demand flow is akin to just-in-time processes that focus on the efficient coordination of demand for goods in production and supply of goods. Okay, good. Come over and let's take a look at the theory of constraints. And I was looking at this earlier. I thought, a person, I'm sure somebody's written a book about this or something, but a person could apply these things almost to your life, right? I mean, anything you want to accomplish is going to be stopped by what? By various constraints, whether perceived, whether just perceived or real, and you have to work around those obstacles to accomplish what you want to, right? So this theory of constraints look at what now from standpoint of business organizations, what impede them from achieving their objectives, okay? And those constraints could be looked at as internal, they could be looked at as external, okay? Now, internal constraints are evident when the market demands, I don't want to highlight that because I have no idea what that sentence means. Internal constraints are evident when the market demands more than the system can produce. Oh, I see. So there's an opportunity out there is what they're trying to say. That's a funny way of putting that, but now I understand what they're saying. Hey, we have an opportunity here, but we can't take advantage of that opportunity because of internal constraints, such as equipment may be inefficient, people may lack the necessary skills, policies may prevent efficient use of resources. Okay, so you can flashcard that as internal. External constraints exist when the system produces more then the market requires. Okay, I get that kind of. And the question to me would be, well, then just cut back production. I mean, just don't produce as much stuff than what the market requires. I don't quite get what they want us to do about this. To me, a more reasonable idea here would be something like, or example, I should say, would be something like government regulation is an external constraint. Well, we would like to do certain things, but we can't because state of California prohibits the use of da da da. So maybe you would think about moving your operation to another state or something. The state of, Florida won't let us, so we're going to move our location elsewhere. I mean, to me, that would be the nature of an external constraint. Okay, good. Now we come over and let's take a look at the 5 steps of this theory of constraints. And let's go ahead and flashcard those. So you need to identify the constraints, of the constraint, planning around the constraint. Okay, for example, what that's potentially wasted by making or selling wrong products. Okay, subordinate everything else to the above decisions, elevate the constraint, add capacity to overcome the constraint, and then you return to the first step for additional constraints, because once you deal with one, then you can go forward and deal with the next constraint, whatever it is. And you would probably deal, of course, with the one that is constraining you the most first, and then move your way up as you start to, I guess, your way down as you consider maybe less restrictive constraints or less impactful constraints, and you deal with them that way through these 5 steps. Okay. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at this 6 sigma. Okay, and again, maybe you heard about some of these things in a management class at some point in time. And 6 sigma is another continuous quality improvement program, and existing product process improvement. Okay, and they call that DMAIC. So you've got a mnemonic there, I guess, to help you remember the 6 sigma steps. But let's just go ahead and take a look at these. And so you can see, define the problem. Okay, measure key aspects of the current process, analyze the data, improve or optimize current processes, and then control essentially is monitoring the results. So I think you're seeing the theme here, and it really doesn't matter well, it does matter because they use different terms, but it seems like a consistent theme throughout. What is the problem, right? What is our current process? What are we not achieving? What is our current process? Then what? Let's look at the data, let's implement the improvements, and then let's monitor. I mean, they're all kind of saying very, very similar things. They're just putting sort of different spins on it, or different terminology, or almost different advertising on it. Okay, good. Now you come over different labels. You come over new product or business process development. Okay, and so what do? We design, we have our design goals. We measure, okay, the critical quality issue. Okay, analyze design alternatives. We optimize the design, and then we verify the design by implementing and testing the plan. Okay, so I think you see, guys, what I was talking about. This material, I guess it's interesting, but for me, it's kind of a little gaseous. Okay, it's kind of up here, kind of stuff. When I'm an accountant, I like numbers and rules and things that I can grab onto and, understand a process and do it correctly. But this stuff is obviously very theoretical. Okay. All right, good. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at our first. So I think our best bet is flashcards on this stuff. But let's just go ahead and take a look at our first question for tonight. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to look at that. Okay, guys, I think we can go ahead and look at this one. Looks like almost everybody's had a chance to try it, and looks like everybody got it right. And yeah, I think if you look at these wrong choices, this is the direct opposite of something called just in time, right? So this is almost can you read, right? Okay, good. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at the next module here. And we start out talking about IT governance, okay? And it came in a little bit later at the beginning of class. I pointed out IT is really what is in the balance of this chapter, and IT is heavy. I'm going to write it again. IT is heavy on the exam, okay? IT, all of the subjects, even though they're breaking them into different categories, okay? It's a heavy area on the BEC exam. When I say it's heavy, I don't think it's as heavy as maybe what students perceive. Something seems like there's a lot on the exam if you get a good number of questions and you're not ready for it. And I think that's why my students are telling me, oh, IT was so heavy. I have a dream that students tell me, because nobody's supposed to tell me what they saw in their exam because I'm not a candidate. So in my dreams, my students come to me and say, this was heavy on the exam. And so in my dreams, a lot of folks are saying that, but I think it's because they probably weren't prepared. They got caught off guard because it's the very end of the last chapter of the book. And it's sort of you know, almost human nature to kind of discount that, right? As you're getting ready for exam and looking at all these different things. So don't snooze on this. It's just like I would make it akin to governmental accounting I would make it akin to governmental accounting on the FAR exam, in that, you know, sometimes my students don't have that problem because I make sure they understand, hey, you got to know this stuff. But you know, it gets a little bit kind of the same thing, that you need to, it's similar, that you need to just acknowledge it for what it is and pay the appropriate attention to it. Okay, so let's take a look at the IT governance. And they tell us that IT governance is a robust framework which can help achieve the goals of the organization by providing a clear understanding of all stakeholders and key functions involved, including people, processes, and technology, performance metrics, risk management, IT development operations, and what benefits result from IT initiatives. So why don't you just go ahead. What we're really talking about here is linking our information technology to the company strategy. Okay, and this is a key thing for any organization these days with the way that IT is so important now. Everything is automated now, so we're to a point where we just really have no choice but to link our IT to our strategy. Okay, so they tell us, although there are no standard governance models that apply to all organizations, multiple governance frameworks exist, and then those models can be standard. So let's go ahead and take a look. They tell us that it's not a one size fits all, but in general, strong data governance models will have practices and policies within the following components. Yeah, let's go ahead and flashcard those. Okay, so we have what? We have availability, information of little benefit to an organization if it is not available to employees at the right time. Okay, so while security may be a high priority, information must not be secured in a way that it creates unnecessary hurdles for those who need it. Architecture, job roles, and IT applications should be designed to enable the fulfillment of the governance objectives. Metadata, data describing other data known as metadata or data dictionaries must be robust in terms of the breadth and specificity. This is something that if you're doing an audit, you always want to get a data, what we call a data dictionary from your clients. So if you're getting that data, you're able to look up and understand how that data is organized, the different types of ways that it is stored, that sort of thing. Okay, policy. Okay, so data governance policies help companies translate management and governance objective into practice. And then quality, we need data integrity. Okay, the data needs to be reliable. I'm sure you've heard garbage in, garbage out. So we have to have reliable data. Okay, coming over and taking a look, regulatory, just continuing on this flashcard, regulatory compliance with privacy issues. If we're providing health care, right? For example, the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, all of these kinds of things, would be a regulatory compliance, and then security. And we're going to talk more about IT security later, but that's obviously a issue of growing importance. Okay. Now, governance framework. Okay, and we've talked about the committee sponsoring organizations of the Treadway Commission before, and they get into different areas dealing with internal controls, and they have this IT governance system integrated framework, and then there's also the ISACA control objectives for information related to technology. That's the another audit organization. So let's take a look first at COSO. Okay, and COSO has various principles here, and they have a 5-point integrated framework. Okay, and so each one of those frameworks then have principles. Okay, so you have control activities, and then there is control activity is one of the principles. So you have control activity, which is principle 11 of the framework, is that there should be general controls over technology. General controls are things like disaster recovery, etc. There should be information and communication. Principle 13 states that the organization should acquire, create, and use quality information to support the internal controls. Coming over, principle 14 states that effective communication of information is necessary to support the internal control. Coming over, when we look at the ISACA control objective, Information System Audit and Control Association, okay, is the ISACA, it's the way I pronounce that anyway, is a not-for-profit organization that was formed to help companies and technology professionals manage, optimize, and protect information technology assets. So we look at what the Control Objective Information Related Technology COVID framework gives a broad roadmap that organizations can use. And we have governance stakeholders. So they distinguish between governance and management and recognize them as two unique disciplines that exist for different reasons and require different sets of organizational resources. Management is responsible for the daily planning, administration of company operations, such as the CEO, Chief Financial Officer, and Chief Operating Officer. Management is, of course, selected by the board of directors. So let's just take a look at how we will align our IT with the organization's objectives. And you can take a look. We have vision, okay? And so with vision, we're going to be looking at how a company vision represents its aspirations and goals. And those goals are described in a vision statement. Accordingly, a company's IT governance policies should be designed in a way that facilitate the achievement of that objective. Okay, that's really what we're talking about when we talk about IT governance, linking our IT with our strategy. And I don't think the companies have any choice here. I mean, this isn't, hey, be a cool company and do this. This is, if you don't do this, you're not going to survive in today's business environment, right? Now, you come down and you can also have corporate strategy, okay? And a corporate strategy is the way the organization achieves the goals and objectives of its mission, excuse me, of its vision. But the strategy shapes an organization's operations and business model, various forms, cost leadership, product differentiation. And again, what we're talking about here is linking a corporate strategy, say, to our IT system, and that's our IT governance. So we have an IT strategy. So we have to literally have an IT strategy. So visualize, virtual, I should say, physical network design. Networks can be physical or virtualized, centralized, decentralized. Okay, for companies that have consistent power needs, it would make sense to invest in a physical network with equipment on site, as this is usually more cost effective than demands could be reasonably estimated. Conversely, for companies that have demands that are intermittently experience sharp spikes, it would be more appropriate to have access to virtual computing power, and then that will, change and will be charged during times that we need more versus less. And we'll talk more about some of that when we talk about cloud reporting here, cloud computing, I should say, in a little while. Centralized and decentralized network designs. Okay, so if you have multiple offices across a wide range, and they may have different needs than those with only a few located offices. Cybersecurity, and we're going to talk more about that. Some organizations have more regulatory burdens and compliance needs than others. Again, if you're a healthcare organization, you have a requirement that you keep that data private if you're collecting social security numbers, these sorts of things. So, and that is going to be, something that's going to continue to be on everyone's radar as we have more and more of these cyber attacks. Okay, disaster recovery and continuity. This is a big deal. You could have a situation where a disaster knocks your systems offline. Well, how are you going to have a short time frame, right, that you will be able to recover from that? I think I mentioned in here, maybe not, I can't remember, but when I was looking at the audit, when we're doing the audit for the public debt, When they're running an auction of Treasury securities, what the Federal Reserve Bank of New York has implemented is a system in which they have one computer that takes all the bids for the Treasury securities in the New York Fed, but they also have an off-site computer that takes all the bids as well simultaneously in New Jersey. And the two systems constantly talk to each other and update each other. And if any data gets dropped between them, they update each other, et cetera. Well, that, although it doesn't sound like a disaster recovery, that kind of, hey, we have to maintain the process while the auction is going on. We can't lose any data. We can't have a power outage that doesn't allow, the auction to continue once it starts. And so they implement something like that. And that's the kinds of things that you would want to be thinking about. And then, of course, the availability of IT personnel, staffing for IT needs can be insourced or outsourced, but we obviously need to be able to make sure that we can get the expertise that we need at any point in time. Okay, good. So go ahead and flashcard at a high level on those components of the ISACA, I should say not ISACA, but of the IT strategy. Okay, come over and let's take a look at structuring and executing IT governance. And you take a look at this, and we have obviously people within the organization ranging from the board of directors. They oversee appointed executive positions, executive management, make key strategic decisions, right? We have the issue of the tone at the top, right? Which we, I think I had used that phrase earlier. I think you know what tone at the top is. And then we have middle management, okay? People below executive management. Middle management is responsible for carrying out the governance policies. IT support staff, okay? So we have what? We have our strategic executive level IT staff, network engineers, help desk, cybersecurity staff, function specific staff. And then of course, we have our accountants, and accountants play an important role in IT governance because much of the data they handle is confidential in nature, banking records, employee records. I have a friend that she's the controller at a company, and she was making the comment to me, gee, those guys, she knows what everybody in the company makes. So she becomes an important from the top executives down. So she becomes, somebody that has an important responsibility to make sure that all that information stays confidential. Okay. So what happens? Let's take a look in flashcards, some of the roles of accountants in the IT system, since we are taking an exam for the CPA. For CPA, I think that might be something that they expect us to know about. So stewards of accounting information, okay? Members of project development teams. You want the accounting folks involved. Obviously, if there's a transaction, you have to know how to account for that, and you're going to have to, automate the way that transaction is run through your system. Then you want accountants involved in making sure that data is going to be collected and allow for the generation of financial reports. High IT utilized systems, accountants may be asked to periodically test and implement some of these changes and provide some of these maybe changes that are being made to the system, and to provide feedback. And then of course, end users, all end users are important members of the governance team because they are equipped to understand the day-to-day technology needs. So these are sort of key areas that you would expect from accounting, and then also end users. And then there could be external stakeholders, and that's obviously those outside the organization that would be affected by maybe some changes we're making. Okay, processes for the execution, and you're going to have project development teams, okay? And Sorry, guys, let me just take a look at my note here for the project development team. Okay. And project development teams formed for new IT projects typically include members of management, IT systems personnel, accountants, and system users. Okay. The team tasks include the following. So let's put on one side of the flashcard who the project development team members are, and then you can say, and these individuals would perform what functions. And so they're going to be doing monitoring the project, maintaining the human elements. Okay, there's always resistance to change, frequent communication with users, holding regular meetings, managing risk and escalating issues that cannot be resolved within the team. So we have the project development team, but then we have a steering committee, and I find it kind of interesting in that you have a steering committee, and it's just kind of funny because what does the steering committee do? They steer the project, right? So it's kind of easy to remember what their role is. It's an oversight role, and it involves developing, committing strategic goals, reviewing IT budget, providing ongoing guidance and addressing big picture issues that arise, ensuring management engagement, and then monitoring the project. So you have your planning team, and then you have a project development team, and then you have your steering committee. Okay. Now, assessing IT risk. Okay, let's just take a look at some of the process for assessing IT risk. And we have this notion of this risk assessment that's going to be done. And we're going to have to do a business impact analysis. Okay, we were sort of talking about this a little earlier. We're talking about the theory of constraints, to identify the bigger things and prioritize the bigger things first, and then deal with some other things that maybe don't have as much impact or as much risk later, or maybe you just accept the risk, right? So that's sort of what we're going to be talking about here. So the objectives of a BIA are as follows. The BIA will identify how quickly essential business units can return to full operation following a disaster. And so we have different objectives here. Estimate the quantitative or financial impact for the organization, a worst case scenario. Estimate the qualitative impact to the organization in a worst case. So we consider both quantitative and qualitative aspects, right? And then identify the organization business unit processes and estimate recovery time frame. That's what we're trying to do. How quickly can we recover from some sort of problem? Now we have to identify our IT resources, okay? And so we have different IT resources, and we can determine the base resources needed to sustain minimum operations. So we're going to consider all the different aspects of our computer systems, our software, our equipment, our printers, our copiers, okay? And so we're going to look at these. When were they placed in service? Machine specifications, make, model, operating systems installed, software applications installed, security software, firmware installed. All of these things are important so that we know what we had before the disaster came, right? I mean, I don't know if you've seen some of these images of the tornadoes that they just had in the South. It's like there's nothing but rubble left after some of these things happen. Well, you can't be sitting there digging through the rubble to see, okay, what kind of computer was that again? How did this interface with that system? So you want to keep track of all of these different resources, okay? Now, as I said, we take sort of a risk management approach to this. And so what we do is evaluate the impact, and the likelihood of the risk. And so if you have a high impact, High impact means that what? High impact means that we can't operate without the resource. We may experience a high recovery cost or may fail to meet the organization's objectives, reputation, and what kind of organization are you? If you're a bank, this is a big deal. I mean, you're affecting people's ability to receive, say, their pay, and you're affecting their ability to make their home payment, house payments, all these kinds of things. I was on a audit where we looked at corporate credit unions. Corporate credit unions have clearinghouse functions where a lot of data runs through them, and then they distribute out information to all the different corporate credit unions. And there was one that it wasn't a disaster, but what they had done was improperly ran some maintenance and backup at the same time on their system. They crashed their system, and it was a big deal because they lost, the people didn't get their payments because the clearinghouse crashed, and so nothing was getting out to the other credit unions. And so as a result, the people were missing their pay and that kind of stuff. So, if you have part of your system that's going to have that kind of an impact, that would be an example of a high impact resource. Okay, so just go ahead and flashcard that. Moderate impact. Under moderate impact, we could partially function, may experience some cost recovery, or may fail to meet the organization's objectives and its reputation. Low impact, okay, you can flashcard that. Low impact, I think you know where this is going, could operate for an extended period of time, or may notice an effect on achieving the organization's objectives, may notice an effect on achieving the organization's objectives or its reputation. Now, when I look at those low impact, I start to think to myself, well, why have them? Okay, but I don't know, maybe we could roll this discussion into some of our, total quality management discussion. Do we really need this if it's such a low impact that we could operate for an extended period of time? Okay, all right, good. Now you come over and then you have to combine the impact with the likelihood, right? So a high likelihood, it's probable, has occurred recently, can occur frequently. Somebody could sit there and say, well, if that's the case, then why do we worry about earthquakes? Because they don't occur that frequently. But, there could also be some predictive modeling that goes into some of this too, right? Of course, obviously, if you're in hurricane country, those are happening all the time and with increased frequency and intensity. And so if you're in the hurricane country, that's definitely falling into the highly probable, high likelihood scenario. Okay, medium risk could occur, but controls are in place. And then low likelihood is probably not going to happen. Okay, so you come over, and I'm not going to ask you to flashcard that. I think you know that. You evaluate those, and I think you can kind of figure this out. I don't think we need a whole lot of the whole table chart with arrows pointing all over the place to know what we need to do here, which is high action, take corrective action as soon as possible. So high action would be those that have what? I guess this thing helps, right? A high impact, high likelihood, take action right away, right? As things start to become less likely, less impactful, then you don't have to deal with them. And they say low action, take no corrective action except the level of risk. And, that's when I start saying to myself, well, why do we have these processes or whatever if in fact, the company can just function fine without whatever it is? Okay. Then you want to go ahead and implement the response. Okay, so how do we implement the response? Identify a mitigation recommendation, evaluate the mitigation recommendation, okay, do a cost benefit analysis, and then implement the disaster recovery plan. Okay, you can go ahead and flashcard that. So it really, is a matter of looking ahead, and taking action, but taking action in a manner that's going to have you dealing with the high impact, high probability items first, right? That's really the main takeaway from that. Okay, let's go ahead and let's take a look at this question. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and let's take a look at this one. And yeah, we got a pretty good outcome here. We've got 76%, that's okay. Now, when I look at some of the choices, A, C, and D, that some of us took, I kind of understand why, obviously C is the right answer. And so, that I obviously understand why you guys chose that one, but I kind of understand why maybe some folks might have fell into some of the traps of some of these other ones. The A, steering committee plan. Well, that's not what they asked us. They asked us what is the responsibility of the steering committee? Well, okay. And then they start describing what a steering committee plan does. They put that as choice A because they're trying to bait you into kind of buying into that one at the beginning there, right? Okay, they're not, the question didn't ask us about a plan. Okay, a steering committee must develop clear specifications for third parties bid, including exact, well, that's sort of, minutia is not something that the steering committee is going to be involved in. The steering committee should be formed to guide, oversee system development and acquisition to steer it in the right direction, right? I mean, that's sort of a, almost can you read thing, right? Now, D, steering committee must assess operations. Okay, assess operations are things that happen on the back end after that's describing the monitoring. The monitoring is always sort of the last step. That's not what a steering committee does. A steering committee gets the project through. Then once we've done that, then we're going to monitor. So, and that's not the objective of the steering committee. Okay. Okay, good. Let's go ahead, guys, and take a break. So let's come back at 6:35. I appreciate your patience. I know this stuff is not the, to keep your head from hitting the table here kind of stuff, but let's just go ahead and, keep working through this, and we'll come back here in about 10 minutes at 6:35. I'm going to pause the recording. Please remind me to start it up again. Resume the recording, and let's move into module 3 here. And we're going to talk about really continue a high-level discussion here of there's primarily definitional in nature. So we start out talking about IT infrastructure, okay, and our IT infrastructure is going to include our hardware, etc. Okay, so when we talk about hardware, we have the computer hardware, which is the actual machine itself, okay, and all its guts and internal, pieces can constitute the computer hardware. But then you also have external hardware devices such as keyboards, speakers, mice, etc. Okay, I think you kind of know this kind of stuff. Okay, now infrastructure housing, although not hardware, the facilities and the safeguards on those facilities that contain hardware, such as data centers or offices, are part of the broader IT infrastructure. And so why don't you go ahead and flashcard that, because I don't think that, the term infrastructure housing, that's the kind of stuff that leaps to mind. So flashcard that, because that's a little less intuitive than some of these others. I didn't have you flashcard because that's, probably in your head already. Okay, now we come over and we start talking about networking devices, and I think we're all aware of what routers do because we all probably have one. So routers manage network traffic by connecting devices from a network. So you probably have a router in your house in which you have different devices connected so you can get your internet signal to those different devices. Switches are similar to routers in that they connect the devices within a computer network, but it's sort of, however, switches do not perform as many advanced functions as a router, such as assigning IP addresses. So by analogy, the same way traditional power strip converts one electrical outlet into multiple, a network switch can turn network jack into several network jacks, so multiple devices can share one network connection. Okay, so why don't you go ahead and flashcard the notion of switches. I'm going to ask you to flashcard routers because I think that's already in your head. Okay, a gateway is a computer or a device that acts as an intermediary between the different networks. It transforms data from one protocol to another so that information can flow between networks. Why don't you flashcard that? So gateway is almost like a translator. And then you have servers, and servers are physical or virtual machines that coordinate the computer's program and data that are part of the network. So most business networks use client-server model in which the client sends a request to the server and provides response to execute some action. And to me, the obvious one is what? A print server. You send the message to the print server to print a document. It executes that for the client when you send that information over. Okay, you can flashcard servers, I guess. And then you have what? You have firewall, and firewall is a very descriptive term. I don't think you need to flashcard it, but let's look at this. A firewall are often software applications or hardware devices that protect a person or company's network traffic by filtering it through security protocols within defined rules. Okay, so for companies, these rules may be aligned with the company's policies and access guidelines. Okay, firewalls are intended to prevent unauthorized access. I think you know that, guys, but it's here. You might get a question on what a firewall does, so I want to make sure we at least talked about it. And if you want to, you can flashcard that. I'll call that optional flashcard. Again, I think some of these things are just so obvious. That says optional flashcard that you don't really need to flashcard them, but if you feel necessary, you could do that. Okay. Now, they have other types of firewalls. Okay. And why don't you go ahead and flashcard some of these, because these don't really leak to mind. You don't walk around with this stuff in your head, I don't think. So critical level gateways control traffic by verifying the source of a packet that meets the rules and policies of the security team. Stateful multi-layer inspection firewalls combine packet filtering and network address translation to control traffic. Network address translation firewalls assign an internal network address to specific approved external sources. And next generation firewall can assign different firewall rules to different applications as well as users. In this way, a low threat application has more permissive rules than a high security application that might have highly restrictive rules. Okay. If you got this far, I think you know what software is. Okay. A network. Okay, and you can have a local area network, which provides network access to a limited geographic area, such as a home office. Wide area network provide network access to larger geographic areas, such as cities, regions, countries, etc. Okay, so go ahead and flashcard that local area versus wide area networks. Okay, mobile technology, and I was kind of sitting here, I don't know if I was laughing or crying as I was looking at this, because this kind of sounds almost childish now after we've gone through with COVID for the last couple of years. But let's just take a look at it. Mobile technology travels with the user and can allow organizational activities to occur in real time, sustaining business that might otherwise collapse during a crisis or temporary inability to meet in person. Do you think we need that kind of stuff? So, I mean, that's really how we kept afloat, right, during the pandemic, right? And it often relies on what? On wireless technology. You think? I mean, all of this stuff we're like, of course, okay? An extension of mobile technology is the Internet of Things, and it's devices which typically require either Bluetooth or an internet connection. And they give us this example of this Matt who says good night to his personal assistant at home, and gives verbal command to make different things happen. It involves artificial intelligence. That's basically Alexa's. So, I mean, what we're not wanting to do here is use brand names. It's the end of the day, but that's really what they're talking about there. Okay, so you can flashcard that. You may not, think of that as being called the Internet of Things, but that's a good example of what they're talking about. Okay, good. Let's take a look at the role of information systems. And when we talk about management information systems, MIS, they're really composed of three components: the accounting information system, decision support system, and executive information system. So let's just go ahead and talk about each of these. And let's start with our accounting information system. And this is the one, of course, we'll spend the most time with, since this is an exam for accountants. And an AIS collects, records, and stores accounting information, then compiles information using accounting rules to report both financial and non-financial information to decision makers. And they say in an enterprise, but I'm like, well, hang on. It's not just in the enterprise, it's also what? Outside of the enterprise. So even though this kind of skewed towards, the discussion kind of skewed towards internal information for decision making, internal decision making, our accounting information system, as we well know, also has to generate data to external decision makers, such as investors and creditors. So it's not just limited to internal. Okay. Now they tell us that a well-designed accounting information system creates an audit trail. The audit trail allows a user to trace transactions from source documents to the ledger and trace the ledger back to source documents. Okay, so that's an important for auditing purposes, which is sort of making my point Well, if we're being audited, we're probably being audited for external financial reporting purposes, right? So it's not just limited to internal, okay? Now we come over and we start to talk about accounting information subsystems, and let's go ahead and let's flashcard the three main subsystems, okay? So we have what? Transaction processing, okay? And it converts economic events into financial transactions, into journal entries, and distributes the information to support daily operations functions and also generate our external reports. A TBS typically covers three main transaction cycles: the sales cycle, the conversion cycle, and the expenditure cycle. Then we have our financial reporting system. And guys, when you flashcard it, you don't have to flashcard all that, blah, blah, blah about it. I'm just reading through that with you so you understand what they're talking about here, but just make your flashcard at a high level, okay? Just the headings here, okay? But the financial reporting system or general ledger system, financial reporting system aggregates daily information from the TPS and other sources for infrequent events such as mergers, lawsuits, or natural disasters to enable regulatory financial reporting. So these two really, when I read through these, are centering more on what? External reporting. Okay. Whereas when we get down here to the management reporting system, provides internal financial information dealing with, and you're recognizing some of the things that we've talked about here, variance analysis, budgeting, cost, volume, profit. That's true what managerial accounting. So that's more what? Internal reporting. That says internal. Okay. Okay, good. Now let's take a look. So flashcard at a high level, these three. Okay, let's take a look at functions of the accounting information system. And again, we have three main purposes, okay? And so let's flashcard those three mains, okay? Again, same kind of thing, flashcard at a high level, 1, 2, 3. But let's just take a look at what these are all about. So they tell us that we record and collect and store data. We have specialized journals allow for automated record keeping of repetitive business transactions. They kind of listed those up there earlier. Repetitive business transactions are going to be things like our sales, our inventory purchases. Okay, we put those into specialized journals. The general, so you have a specialized journal, but you also have a general journal, and the general journal are utilized for non-routine, infrequent transactions. I don't know, investments. Okay, we may not make investments that much. We have a little excess cash. We want to make investment. We don't have to have a specialized journal from that because those don't happen as often. We could put that in the general journal, and then they tell us that recorded transactions are automatically assigned to the appropriate accounting period and classification by type. So collect, record, store, and really sort the transactions, okay? Then transforming data into information through compilation and reporting. And you can see here that as transactions recorded, general ledger accounts are updated in real time, allowing a quick summarization of data. So we're making entries in journals, then we're updating the ledgers, and for certain accounts, we may also even have subsidiary ledgers. And so AIS systems have built-in functions that allow financial statements to automatically be compiled. So you're using some sort of system that is then going to allow you to go press a button and the financial statements are generated as this data is collected, okay? And then safeguard and maintain integrity. And again, guys, I want you to flashcard just the high level, okay? I'm just reading through these descriptions so you understand what these things do, but put it at a high level in your flashcard. We have input controls to protect against errors occurring as transactions are recorded. Classic input control in any accounting information system is the debit has to equal the credit. You try to make a journal entry and debits aren't equal credit, it's going to bounce that transaction back, right? That's an input control. So you can go ahead and just flashcard that high level number 3. Okay. Okay, good. Let's look at the sequence of events that occur in accounting information system. Okay. And let's go ahead and I think we can flashcard these. Why not? Okay, so the sequence, you have the original source document, original source document, and then transactions are recorded in the appropriate journal, sales, inventory purchase, general journal. Transactions are posted to the general and subsidiary ledgers. Trial balances are prepared. We make any adjustments, and then financial statements and reports are generated. You know, sometimes I get students to say, well, doesn't this mean that accountants are going to be replaced by computers because the computers can do all this? Well, first of all, someone has to understand what the, accounting implications are of a particular transaction and has to make sure that the machine is programmed in such a way. We may not program the machine, but we would talk. Remember, we said that accountants are part of the project team. We would talk with the IT folks to explain to them how that transaction needs to be captured by the machine. But then you have what? Then you have all of these other things that happen later on that really involve strong accountant knowledge so that what sort of adjustments need to be made, that sort of thing. And that's always going to require the people in this class to be able to do that part. So no, machines aren't going to make accountants. I keep picturing, the Terminator coming and his goal is to, wipe out all accountants or something. That's not happening. Okay, so you can kind of put that concern to sleep. Okay, good. Now you come over and you take a look, and they give us a visual of this. I don't know that this is necessary for us to spend a lot of time with, but you can kind of see that process to us here. Okay, good. That's our accounting information system. Let's look at decision support system. A decision support system is an extension of the management information system. Remember, we have 3 components. And it assists in day-to-day decision making. Okay, it can help us with what-if scenarios. Okay, important to achieve organizational goals and strategies because we can model. Artificial intelligence are designed to rely heavily on artificial intelligence, referred to as an expert system. And you can go ahead and flashcard that because I don't think that we necessarily think of artificial intelligence as an expert system. So that's kind of a definitional thing. So you can flashcard that. But example there, we could have a very complicated document agreement with a client, and we're trying to figure out if it meets the requirements to be, say, a capital lease. Well, they now have artificial intelligence. My understanding is they can basically read through the document and look for some key terms and help us to determine, hey, is this a capital lease? Is this a operating lease, et cetera? So those are having implications for decision making, although that's more specific to accounting, but that's the kind of thing that these artificial intelligence can help us with. Okay. Now you come over and you can also have executive information system beyond the management information system. So the executive information system provides senior executives with immediate and easy access to internal and external information. And EIS may be a standalone or a subsystem of a larger management information system. So it doesn't have to be part of the MIS, but it was one of the things, one of the pieces that we had called out for our management information system, where we have the accounting information system, the decision support system, and now the executive information system. But go ahead and flashcard that it could be part as a part of a standalone piece. It doesn't have to be part of the management information system. Okay. Okay, good. Now we go ahead and we start to talk about customer relationship systems. Okay, and we have different CRM objectives. But let's just take a look. CRM is a software that enables organizations to monitor and manage interactions between the organization and customers. And I tell you guys, they are listening to us, because there'll be times where I'll be talking about something to somebody, and then all of a sudden I start getting feed on Facebook or whatever, where they're sending me an advertisement or something, or sending me an email, even in some cases, about, oh, wouldn't you like to be able to, and I'm like, I was just talking about this yesterday to somebody. So I think if you don't put your phone on a certain setting, they hear you, what you're saying, and then they start this customer relationship thing, but it starts to get a little creepy at some point. But anyway, but you take a look and let's see what some of the CRM objectives are. And I'm not going to ask you to highlight these things, because I think, if you've experienced things like what I'm just talking about, you've already dealt with these. Anticipate customer needs, right? Drive sales and satisfaction. Enable cross-selling, upselling or product or services. Oh, you bought a pair of pants. Okay, well, let's send this person now 52 emails about shirts that go with the pants that they bought, whatever, right? Forecast sales and manage staff. Manage sales leads. All of these things are, obvious kinds of things that are the objective of these sort of, annoying customer relationship management systems that we're all exposed to now. Okay, so let's take a look at what of the CRM strategies are. Okay, and again, this is so obvious. Collecting and capturing information about customers to create customer profiles, data points, email, age, spending habits. Unfortunately, I keep getting things, about, things to help you because you're getting old is the step that I'm getting now, which is, again, like, leave me alone. Don't remind me that I'm going to need some pill here at some point in time. Okay, customer information and satisfaction can be collected directly from customers by using loyalty cards, reward program, right? Would you like to join our such and such program today? And then you get points, right? And you're always have to go back to this store because I've got these points accruing. Customer satisfaction can also be derived indirectly through data mining of social media, online reviews, these sort of things. Okay, I think we're all very aware of these things. Okay, now types of customer relationship management. Okay, and you can have, they said that there's 3 types, and so let's go ahead and flashcard the 3 types. You can have operational CRM, and this focuses on the automation of business tasks such as sales, service, and marketing to streamline a simplified business process. Analytical CRM are designed to collect and analyze customer information, provide insights to management to aid in decision making. Collaborative or strategic CRM enable organizations to achieve its goals by providing collaboration and sharing of customer information across functions such as sales, marketing, service, and support teams. Okay, good. You can flashcard those. And then let's take a look at inventory management. Okay, and what inventory management allows is to track items quantities and trigger reordering when quantities fall below a predetermined level. These systems are usually connected to a point of sale system. So each time there's a sale, it's removed from the inventory account. And again, inventory count, if they have these sophisticated systems, why are they out of everything all the time? I don't get it. Okay, if they have this kind of sophistication, but it seems like everywhere I go, they don't have anything I want. Okay, but anyway, a knowledge management system, let's just look at now, knowledge management system refers to any IT system that disseminates knowledge related to the organization. So frequently asked questions, okay, can be considered a knowledge sharing management system. And you can go ahead and flashcard the definitions of both of those. And that example is a good one. I think frequently asked questions is a knowledge management system. Okay, supply management systems and supply management systems characteristics. Okay, an integrated supply chain management system unifies business processes beginning with the original supplier and ending with the customer, including purchasing materials, handling, production planning, and control logistics, warehousing, inventory control, the whole function until it's finally in the hands, the item is in the hands of the person, of the customer. A supply chain management system, or the SCM, I guess it's not considered a system, is concerned with 4 important characteristics of every sale: what, when, where, and how much. Okay. Okay, good. Now let's take a look at the objectives and functions of a supply chain management. And so these systems generally incorporate the following functions: planning, sourcing, making, and delivery. Now, the thing that when I looked at, because procurement, credit, and collections, it seems to me that making would come before procuring, credit, and collections, because you have to have something to sell before you can expect a collection. So I was a little suspect on the order, if this is a step order or just a random listing of the different parts. I mean, I could see how making, planning comes first, and then making and delivering comes at the end. I get that, but I think I might flip the making and then the sourcing, which is the procurement, credit, and collections. But I don't think that's a very critical issue. So just go ahead and flashcard this. Okay, now you come over and you take a look at the core benefits of an integrated supply chain management system. Include greater transparency and access to data. SCM systems reduce cash tied up in inventory, which in turn increases cash flow, predictability. They also improve forecasting for procurement, delivery, production due to better visibility of data from the start of the supply chain to the end. Okay, and I mean, I thought that these supply chain management things were, working, but I feel like now the approach is just don't carry any inventory, make everybody wait for everything. Don't worry about your customer going somewhere else because they have nowhere else to go. And so they're gonna, as we have more and more, just large, giant corporations taking over the world. And so what else are you going to do? You have nowhere else to go to get the things that you want. And so they just kind of condition us to just be patient little, people just bowing and saying, okay, where do I sign to get my 6 to 8 weeks? So I have to wait for this stuff. But these are theories, I guess, anyways, the way they're supposed to work. Okay, assuming there's some sort of, the key thing here is that you have competition. You don't have competition, none of this stuff matters. Okay, now you come over and we talk about enterprise resource planning. Now, enterprise resource planning is sort of a holistic approach here. So enterprise resource planning systems are cross-functional systems that are business function and allow for the integration of information across various departments such as accounting, customer management, finance, human resources, etc. Okay, so why don't you go ahead and put that flashcard for the definition, and then here comes our benefits versus disadvantage, advantage versus disadvantage. So we're going to go ahead and flashcard these. Advantages, disadvantages. And let's just go ahead and take a look at some of the detail here. So it stores information as central repository. acts as a framework for integrating, okay, improving the organization across functions, provides vital cross-functional, right? Improves customer service as information is easily accessed and shared, and allows greater access control so that user privileges for multiple systems can be centrally managed. Disadvantage, okay, the time to successfully implement the ERP system can be significant. They can be extremely cost prohibitive. Integration of all business units can be complex because you have all these different parts of the company, right? And this data going across the enterprise. And ERP implementation causes significant changes to business processes, which can lead to errors, user resistance. So when you look at the disadvantages, I think that it's more what the disadvantages of implementing an enterprise resource planning system versus, you know, the day-to-day operation of it. You can see the benefits of the enterprise resource planning approach. Okay, now enterprise performance management is a system which we've also seen could be called business performance management or corporate performance management system, are software solutions designed to help executives make strategic decisions. Okay, EPMs are useful for the analysis at a high level. Okay, so you have the enterprise performance versus the enterprise resource planning. Okay, so you can flashcard that. So you've got that difference. This is more high level. Okay, good. Let's talk about e-commerce. And what I like about this section is it actually, you know, puts definitions on things that you hear all the time. And you're like, what are they talking about? Because I'm not real good all the time with, you know, acronyms for things. And I'm like, will you please speak English to me? So, you know, bonus will say it's B2B, it's B2C, and I'm always having to keep track of what they mean by the different acronyms. So it helps me to, you know, kind of understand a little better, you know, review a little better what all these different terms mean. So we're going to flashcard some of these. So e-commerce, okay, platforms facilitates the sales and goods using the internet. So e-commerce is all about the internet, okay? And they tell us, and I think this is self-explanatory, the benefits of e-commerce, and it removes overhead costs, creates market that might not exist, promotes competitive pricing, allows for product comparison more quickly, and provides parity for information amongst market participants. Okay. Now, these benefits do come with drawbacks such as lag times in shipping for physical products. That's what I've been whining about all day here, right? System vulnerability, potential theft of personal information, and there's less human customer support available. It was funny, I was at one of the department stores and I was talking to one of the sales folks and I was talking about them. Oh, I know what I was talking about, that they had closed one of the stores that I used to go to. So now I have to go further down. I was like, yeah, they keep getting rid of stores. And then the person said, yeah, pretty soon they're going to get rid of us. And she meant the salespeople. I said, do you mean us as in human beings or us as the salespeople? So, you know, that's happening, that there's less interaction. Everything is going to, you know, ordering things online and whatnot. And, you know, to their credit, these companies make it easy enough to return the stuff if you don't want it and all that. But it just seems to me at some point, there's got to be somewhere where you go and you can interact with, you know, your customer and stuff. So go ahead and flashcard that disguised, cleverly disguised as a what? Benefit versus disadvantage, advantage versus disadvantage discussion. So flashcard that. Okay, now you take a look and types of e-commerce. And again, what I liked about this section is it put definitions or reminded me of the definition of things you hear rattling around all the time in your head, right? So you have what? Business to business involves the buying and selling of products and services between business entities, okay? It allows businesses to seamlessly and sometimes automatically interact with each other. So you get to that just-in-time idea. And we could, before you would do this, you would do a system trust audit with that other entity. If you're going to let their system talk to your system, but once you've kind of got past any concerns that there'd be some, viruses that might be spread or lack of integrity of the data, they hack into that person, by that avenue, they can hack into you, those kind of problems. But once you kind of work through that, you could set something up so that your supplier monitors your inventory levels, and when they get below a certain level, the computer automatically orders more until you tell them, hey, stop doing this, right? So that would be sort of a business to business approach. And why don't we just go ahead and flashcard these definitions: business to business, business to customer. And guys, the annoying thing is they'll say, what is B2B? What is B2C? Because nerds are writing your exam, right? So that's why I'm asking you to flashcard this. But B2C e-commerce allows business interface to sell goods to customer, typically done online via retail websites that are often integrated. Now, they have standalone. Okay, so what standalone does, and I think you've probably seen this, where you're dealing with a different vendor, but you end up in the same system when you order something. I don't know if you've experienced that. He was a different vendor, but when I put in my information, I never bought anything online from this store before, but they have my information already. Why is that? Well, they're probably using a standalone. It's usually smaller companies. And so you will, these companies will sort of prescribe to this standalone one versus integrated is when you go to that store's website. So now you're going to buy something from Macy's, you go to Macy's. Macy's probably doesn't use a standalone. They use the integrated, which is just for larger stores. So with that, you can go ahead and maybe flashcard or maybe make a separate flashcard for that component of business to customer. Consumer to business, okay? And so you take a look, and guys, I want you to get flashcard all 5 of these, okay? Consumer to business, e-commerce is reversal traditional buying. And in this type of e-commerce, consumers offer their goods or services to a business. And then consumer to consumer, and this is what these are often intermediary companies host a platform for execution of transactions, and the host usually charges a fee for the service. And there's all kinds of these kinds of things out there now. And then government e-commerce, yeah, I mean, the government's probably the last in on this, but I paid my property taxes the other day, and I just went straight to Alameda County's website and paid my property taxes right there. That's a government e-commerce example. Okay, those arrows mean I want you to flashcard all of these 5 different types. Okay, good. Let's take a look at the next page, e-commerce payment methods. I think we're all aware of electronic funds transfer, and the Federal Reserve is the one that runs the EFT, and so you don't have to process checks anymore. You just have the funds transferred immediately from one entity to the other, and the Federal Reserve System kind of runs that whole thing. Okay, there have been increased use of digital payments to transfer directly between users without the use of a clearinghouse or a bank. And the classic example there is what is blockchain networks use a distributed ledger to account for transactions in digital currencies rather than more traditional currencies. Communication, okay, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the communication aspects here. Most companies utilize email and their internal and external core communications, but there could also be hardwired telephone networks, voice over internet protocol, virtual meeting via video conferencing. Again, some of this sounds childish after what we've been through. Instant meeting, live chat options, texting via smartphones, social media platforms are all ways of communicating. Now, where this becomes important to a certain extent is as an internal control. you probably would want two different ways of communicating for decisions that are made at a high level where amounts are going to be being dispersed. So, you wouldn't just want email to go out to say, please disperse, $50 million to this particular entity or particular individual, whatever it is. You'd want some sort of second authentication of that. So you'd say, well, it has to be an email, but there also has to be a text message that comes along with that, or hello, get up and actually go speak to a person, assuming we're in a place where we can walk to speak to each other, right? So, you probably want two levels of communication, two means of communication for a lot of important decisions. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and take a look at IT outsourcing and cloud computing. And cloud computing is renting storage space, processing power, etc. Combination of three on remote servers from another company rather than buying or building those components. Okay, and so these sort of services offer infrastructure elasticity, meaning that we only rent as much as needed on a minute-to-minute basis. Process and storage are rented in increments of computing power used per units of time. So customers pay smaller amount during lower volume periods and larger amounts during high volume periods. So rather than creating these systems, you can rent this time and you can have that elastic, and that it grows and shrinks accordingly, and thus the cost grows and shrinks accordingly as needed. Now you come over and they tell us on the next page that additional efficiency exists when a company's data is in one virtual location. The company operations are in many locations. Okay, now you come over and we have different types of infrastructure, and we have infrastructure as a service. So infrastructure as a service are also known as hardware as a service, and it is utilized when an organization outsources any of its servers, storages, hardware, networking services, and network components to third-party providers, and are generally billed on a per-use basis. So that's going to be infrastructure. Okay. Services, flashcard that, platform service, flashcard all of these. Okay, platform services, okay, abbreviated as PaaS, okay, allows customers to rent tools or solutions remotely that are used to fulfill specific business purpose, such as pay online platform to sell merchandise, advertise products, or build websites. SaaS, service as service, and I think you've heard this term thrown around, is a business model in which a company delivers and hosts subscription-based software services to customers. Can you say Apple? I mean, Apple's a SaaS company, right? I mean, that's basically pretty much what they do create the phones, but they really generate quite a bit of revenue as a SaaS business, right? But you take a look and they tell us that they give us licensing services and deliveries, and they tell us this term is commonly used interchangeably with application service provider. So that's why I hear Apple, talked about a lot as being a SaaS company, but to me, they're probably more an application service provider. But go ahead, get into that argument with somebody and see, where that goes. But go ahead and flashcard these different terms. Again, these terms are thrown around a lot, and so it's worth having them on a flashcard and seeing if they come up on question. But it also helps you to kind of keep up with some current technology, current terminology, I should say. IT outsourcing advantages. Let's take a look at that. Lower costs. You get access to expertise that might be very costly to retain, right? Resource organizations have no access to specialized and high quality resources. You may not even be able to attract those resources, right? Enhanced focus and core business. An organization out says it can spend less time on the complexity of IT and more time on their strategies. So since that's an outsourcing advantage versus outsourcing disadvantage, right? Another one of those. So let's flashcard that. Disadvantages, less control. Okay, things are going to be outsourced. Quality control, you can't necessarily decide, once you're in a contract with them, how effective the services are that you're providing. And then immediate access to IT support. There may be some time delays. Maybe they've been offshored, outsourced and offshore. There could be time differences. Meanwhile, you have an immediate need. All of these things could be considered disadvantages. Okay, let's take a look at some risk, which risk can be perceived as a disadvantage as well. But let's take a look. Security and privacy issues. You're turning your customer data over to an entity. You're going to want to do, and they have ways, it's not like you just got to, cast caution to the wind and pray that nothing bad happens. They have tools, web trust audits that you can have a CPA firm do to go in and see this entity that you're going to be giving this information to. Do they have the proper controls in place? And we're going to actually talk about those sort of types of assurances that you can get here in a couple of minutes when you're going to go ahead and start outsourcing things. Okay, inadequate controls, misuse or abuse of data, right? Data accessibility problems, okay, because the data could be lost or overwritten because they don't do a good job of maintaining it. They dispose the data, and they dispose to it in a manner that allows it to be somehow inappropriately obtained by others. Vulnerability of attacks. Again, if they don't have the right kind of controls in place, then there could be some problems there. So flashcard that. But we do have ways around that. And again, we can employ auditors to come in and start to look at certain aspects of an entity that we're thinking about outsourcing and get some assurance. Now, what I find interesting, the way we have described this, we have these different system and organization control reports, and there's 3 of them. There's an SOC1, an SOC2, and an SOC3. Now, what is interesting here is the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, who writes your exam, has gotten involved in writing standards for auditors that'll give assurances around an entity's systems, and it's usually for outsourced providers. And the SOC1 report is really designed for auditors of entities that are using a service provider, and we need some assurance about the internal control for our financial statement audit for entities that are using outsourcing. Okay, so what happens is if your client uses, say, ADP for their payroll, and they probably do. Well, ADP doesn't want every auditor of every company coming and knocking on the door and saying, hey, as part of our financial statement audit, we have to look at your internal controls. So what they do is they'll issue a report, and that report talks about that there was an auditor that came in and looked at the controls over their system. Okay, so that's really what these SOC1 reports are doing, and the SOC1 report provides assurance that service organizations' controls are designed and operating effectively so the financial statements are not negatively impacted. And as an auditor, you just acquire this report and you don't have to do any work of the controls at the service provider. Now, there are 2 types of SOC1 reports, and one is when there has just been a look at the design of the controls, but the controls were not tested. Okay, so controls not tested, they simply looked at the design of the controls and they issued that report. Now, if you're an auditor and you get that service provider report and it's an SOC1 where type 1 report, that means that you'll still have to do the full amount of substantive testing because they haven't tested the operating effectiveness of the controls. What you'd really want, and probably, big organizations like ADP would absolutely have an SOC1 type 2 report. Now, not only have they looked at the design of the controls, but they have also looked at the operating effectiveness. In other words, the controls were what? Were tested. And so now you could use that report to achieve a lower assessment of the risk of material misstatement for at least the payroll, let's say in the case of ADP, and that could then result in having to do less substantive testing. But again, we haven't taken the audit class yet. This may not all quite be ringing a bell for you, but the issue here is the SOC1 report is for audits of financial statements. I mean, that's the main thing that we're talking about here, okay? Now, when you get into the SOC2 and the SOC3, okay, SOC2 report, again, is governed by the AICPA statement on standards for attestation engagements, number 18, both SOC1 and SOC2 and 3 all fall under that same standard, okay? But you come over and it is for users who need attestation concerning controls that relate to the security, processing, integrity, availability, and privacy of data. These reports are important for vendor management, oversight of the company, risk management, corporate governance, and regulatory oversight, okay? And so go ahead and flashcard that definition. Did I tell you to flashcard these two? Yeah, flashcard SOC1, type 1 and type 2. Okay, what SOC1 reports do, and then there's the two types, okay, type 1, type 2. And then go ahead and flashcard what the SOC reports do, and there's type 1 and type 2, and it's the same kind of thing. Report type 1 is for management explanation or description of the service company has a suitably designed control. Type 2 means that we also looked at what? At operating effectiveness. So here they were not tested. Here they were tested. Okay, so this may not have financial statement audit implications. This now gets more back. I'm going to have a business to business type of arrangement. I'm going to allow my computer system to talk to your computer system. I don't want a situation where someone hacks into my system through your system. So before you engage in that kind of relationship of business to business, the company, right, would go and say, let's see your SOC2, and I would think you'd want a type 2 report. Type 1 report, I don't think is advisable, but that's just me. I'm a risk adverse kind of person, okay? Okay, good. And then SOC3, they tell us, is for individuals that don't really understand the implications of an SOC2 report. And you can just go ahead and flashcard that. Okay. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and look at questions, the next couple questions. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this one. Looks like most of us have had a chance to try it. And most of us got it right, 73% of us. Reduction of frequency of errors, because if we're using electronic funds transfer, we're probably not having as much input of information, manual input of information. Just think of your own online banking. You put in the parameters of where you want, what you want, when you want to send, that kind of thing, and then the system just does the rest of it. So you don't have all these data entry errors that you would need to worry about. And I didn't share the results, but most of us, 73% of us, got it right. Now, when I look at some of these others, it looks like we had a few folks interested in A here. And you take a look, improve of the audit trail. No, because if it's electronic funds transfer, there's probably not going to be a paper trail. And remember, the high cost of storing data electronically could create the issue of the disappearing audit trail, right? So I'm not sure that there's going to be enhanced documentation there of audit trail for cash receipts and disbursements. Creation of self-monitoring access controls. I don't know what that means. Okay, so creation of self-monitoring access controls. D, offsite storage of source documents for cash transactions. That's a what? A disadvantage. That's not a benefit. That's not an advantage. Okay. Okay, good. Let's just take a look at the next question. Okay, guys, let's look at this one. Looks like just about everyone's had a chance to give it a shot. And so we're going to see that just about everyone got it right. And I sympathize with the folks that picked B, because obviously, these planning systems are designed to help with the decision process. But when you look at C, enterprise resource planning, the C description is more precise, right? So integrate data from all, remember, it's the holistic approach, all aspects of the organization activity, and we get all that data sort of in one place, and there's a more cross-functional approach to decision making. Was the primary resource benefit of the enterprise resource planning system. This to me looks like a question Becker wrote and somebody got lazy and just put as B, help with the decision-making process. Probably they shouldn't have had that one there, and that's probably why you got looped into that one. Okay, there is an executive information system that does the D, and then I don't know, allow non-experts to make decisions. Okay, yeah, that's a good way to end up bankrupt. So, okay. Question. Okay, guys, we're going to end early because we're coming up on module 4, and that's a fairly long module. And, you know, I have a aversion to starting a module and not being able to finish it in the time we have left. So let's just go ahead and stop there. We will reconvene on Thursday. We're in good shape on time. We will complete chapter 6 next time. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of the class, the balance of the class, I'm going to start to get into final review mode. So you want to make sure that you are getting ready to get your final review book. It looks a lot like, well, I'll tell you what, I'll show you what it looks like. Looks like this. Okay, it's a thinner book. Okay, what we'll do is we'll sit here and we're going to go through as much of this book as we can after next week, the couple weeks we have left after that, which is going to be geared towards getting you ready for your exam. And so we can cover quite a bit of this material in those couple weeks we have left. And I'll go through some of the economics to chapter 5 stuff with you live live via Zoom here, but we'll go through that together in the next couple of weeks after next week's class. Okay, but make sure you've got this book ready to go for that, which will start on not next week, but the week after. Okay, question? Okay, guys, I will see you next week. We'll finish up chapter 6. So take advantage of some of the extra time here to, keep up with your homework. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.